Thank you so much. That's a wonderful welcome for our special guest. Just a real quick note. Welcome everyone to Sacramento Public Library. My name is Ricardo Ramirez. I'm System Supervisor of Community Engagement here at the library. We're really excited to have you all here. We're excited to have our special guests. Afterwards, Capital Books will be selling copies of Mr. Cooper's New York Times best-selling book, Better Living Through Birding. So that's exciting. There'll be a book signing out in the lobby as well. So we're really excited to have everybody have a moment with Mr. Cooper. So I'm going to go straight to it. In addition to his wonderful memoir, we also have the pleasure of exploring with Mr. Cooper on his National Geographic show, Extraordinary Birder. And with that, I'm just going to hand it off to our very special guest, Mr. Christian Cooper. Thank you very much.
Is this thing on? Can you hear me? Good, yay. Hi, thank you for having me. I've never been to Sacramento before, so it's a pleasure to be here, and thanks for making me feel so welcome, which is really nice. I'm going to start right off the bat. Well, first of all, this is the first time I've had an interpreter doing sign language next to me, so hopefully she's not like that interpreter for Obama in South Africa, who was just kind of making things up. But I wanted to start off with a question, because I really did not have a sense of who the audience would be. How many of you here are birders? Okay, so a good smattering, but by no means the majority. How many of you have an interest in birds and paying attention to birds? Okay, so all of you should consider yourselves birders, because there is no rule. It's not like, oh my God, I don't know the scientific name of that bird, I can't possibly consider myself a birder. No, if you are interested in birds and you spend some time paying attention to them, then you are a birder. It's that simple. And you can become as engaged as much or as little as you feel, and trust me, you will get sucked in. And those of you who raised your hands neither time, by the end of this presentation, you will be raising your hand. So I'm going to talk about birding in general, its pleasures, and also its pitfalls, and we'll get to the pitfalls later, what I mean by that. But first I want to talk a little bit about why birds at all, and here I'm going to try to multitask. Can I do this? Yes, I can. Why should we pay attention to birds at all? What is it about birds that's so interesting? Well, for one thing, a lot of people might think, oh, we should be paying attention to, the mammals, like our dogs and our cats. And of course, we pay attention to our dogs and our cats. We love our dogs and our cats. But if you're looking for wild animals, mammals are a lot harder to get a handle on. And let me show you something. This is a map of the density of bird species in the world. And then this is a map of the density of mammal species. And you might say, okay, they look kind of similar, actually. The same intensity where it gets reddest is in the tropics. And if you know anything about sort of biology, for whatever reason, the tropics tend to support a big diversity of species. So that makes sense. They both look the same until you look at the number on the left there as 678 species where it gets reddest for the birds, and only 212 species for the mammals where it gets reddest. So that's one reason why birds are so much more accessible to us, because there are so many different kinds, and you can really dig into them. Also, a lot of the birds, most of the birds are diurnal, active in the daytime, whereas a lot of mammals are nocturnal. And the other reason why birds are so engaging for us is because they communicate the same way we do. They communicate, their primary senses are their vision and their hearing, sight and sound. So when you're talking about a bird, you're talking about something like this Magellanic woodpecker with this beautiful red head and this black back and the contrasting white in the wing feathers in there. Very dramatic, bold, visual patterning. Now compare that to, Fido. He's cute, but he's brown. In a sort of, and the other thing is, and this is why I picked this photo, and look what's going first and forward, the nose. Our dogs and our cats, their primary sense is their sense of smell. For us, it's not the case. We don't go around sniffing each other's butts when we first meet. Our dogs do. So because of that, because birds communicate the same way we do, we can appreciate all the incredible vocalizations they make. We can appreciate the incredible colors and patterns that they display to communicate to each other, but we can get into it. And then the other thing is that birds can fly. I mean, and not all birds, but the vast majority of birds. And that just represents an unparalleled amount of freedom. If you think about it, theoretically, there is no part of the globe that a bird can't reach. I don't have evidence to support this, but it is my hypothesis, and I don't know how you would test the hypothesis, that the reason why birds are the only dinosaurs that survived the Great Extinction is because they had the whole globe at their disposal. They could reach anywhere to find some little patch of the planet where they could survive when it all went to hell, when that asteroid hit. And for those of you who don't know, birds are living dinosaurs. You look at a pigeon, you are looking at a dinosaur. Another reason why birds are unbelievably cool. But the fact that they can fly, that they have this unparalleled freedom, and I think particularly for us African Americans, because of our history and a freedom that was so long denied us, the fact that you can look at this creature and it can go anywhere, just the way it thinks must be so radically different from the way we think. We think in terms of, oh, I want to move forward or backward, left or right. They have a whole new axis of dimension, a whole new way of thinking. They can go left, right, forward, backwards, up, down. Completely different way of thinking. Unparalleled freedom. It's the most inspirational thing you could possibly have. So I think that's another reason why we love birds. So, with all these things for loving birds, what is so pleasing about birding? And here I have to explain a little bit of my own obsession, which is the spring songbird migration in Central Park. That's my holy month of Ramadan, as I have said. And I said that once when they were getting ready, before my show had started, but they were getting ready to put the show on air and put it together. And I got this message from the executives at National Geographic saying, oh, because you observe Ramadan, we think we should move the show. And I'm like, wait, what? So they had taken that literally. I'm like, no, it's okay. But because I observe the holy month of Ramadan is my spring songbird migration in Central Park, I basically, for that month it's about 6 weeks, from about the middle of April until the end of May, and I disappear from the world. I stopped going to the gym. I stopped going out at night. I stopped socializing with friends because I'm getting up every morning at like 4:30 and spending 5 or 6 hours in Central Park looking for birds. It doesn't leave a lot of room for anything else. And my friends gave me so much expletive deleted over the fact that I am not available, don't want to hear from them, am not taking their phone calls, and they're like, what's with this birding thing? Why don't we not see you for 6 weeks? And finally, I got so sick of hearing this that I boiled it down into the 7 pleasures of birding, carefully articulated so I could explain to them concisely exactly what's going on. And so in the book, my book, Better Living Through Birding, which, by the way, I should mention, is not a birding how-to. It is a memoir. It is a story of my life. But because birding has been a big part of my life, the book is shot through with birding. And when I say it's not a birding how-to, it does nonetheless have how-to tips in it about birding. So it is a little bit of a birding how-to. But in it, one of the things I litter throughout the book are these 7 pleasures of birding. So I figured a good way to sort of talk to you guys, birders and non-birders alike, is to sort of articulate some of these and maybe even see if any of you have any sort of similar experiences. So the 7 pleasures of birding start with number 1, the beauty of the birds. A no-brainer. What do I mean by the beauty of the birds? Let's take a little trip. That is a scarlet tanager. You don't get them out here in California, but boy, do we get them in the East. And that red is incandescent. That photo actually does a pretty good job of capturing it, but not quite. It just glows. When you get a spring male in good light, it's like the bird is on fire. So one aspect of the beauty of the birds, like that, with the red contrasting with the black wings. Right? That is a harlequin duck. I have seen harlequin ducks. They winter down along the Rockaway Piers in New York City, but this is a male in breeding plumage. And okay, I have nothing if not consistent. I'm gay. I love gorgeous males. And this guy is beautiful. The other great thing to know about the harlequin duck is it has the best scientific name ever. Anybody know the scientific name of the harlequin duck? Histrionicus histrionicus. Yes. Harlequin, so harlequin duck. That is my personal favorite, a Blackburnian warbler. Warblers are little tiny birds, smaller than sparrows, and very active. So they can be easily missed, easily ignored, unless you're really paying attention and know what you're looking for. I like to describe warblers as butterflies with personality. And this particular one, as you can see, from a spring male in good plumage, the throat is incandescent orange. It's like as if the bird had swallowed a little piece of the setting sun. It's a knock your socks off bird. Snowy owl. No further explanation needed, except that one showed up in Orange County, just outside of LA. Was it last year? It was either last year or the year, it was last year. Yeah, that's insane for 2 reasons. Number 1, snowy owls live up in the Arctic. Now, they do come down in the wintertime in search of food. Depending on the year, sometimes you get 1 or 2, sometimes you get a whole bunch. But for one to come all the way down to Southern California, and then it was hanging out on top of a rooftop in a suburban community. Snowy owls like open tundras, so if they come down, they're going to be hanging out in airports or beaches that kind of replicate the same kind of open habitat as they hunt up north. This bird was hanging out on a rooftop in a suburb. It was crazy. So, snowy owl. Ruby topaz hummingbird. Now, this bird, I was in Trinidad and Tobago visiting my mom. She was from Trinidad. And I had wanted to see this bird so badly, and I couldn't find it. And there was one hummingbird I did see, and it sat on a wire, and I saw it every day, so it must have been its territory, and it was like staking it out. And it would kind of spread its tail feathers out, and it looked purple, but the rest of the bird was gray, and that was it. And I'm like, I have no idea what kind of hummingbird that is, because it's just gray with a purple tail. And then one day the light shifted, and it was as if someone had lit a match, because the whole bird lit up that fiery red with that gold at the throat. And one time, a little later, I saw 2 of them fighting, 2 males fighting over territory, and they were tumbling end over end down towards the ground as they were fighting, and it was like flashes of red, like matches. So the iridescence, the light-dependent coloring of some of these birds, particularly the hummingbirds, is awesome. American kestrel, probably our most colorful raptor, adorable, tiny, our smallest falcon, tiny little guy, fierce. And I say guy because he has blue wings. So if a kestrel has blue wings, it's a male, and if it has reddish wings like the rest of it, it's a female. One of the few raptors that has that kind of sexually dimorphic coloring, different different coloring depending on gender. Cinnamon teal. I am dressed in cinnamon teal colors today. I say that because I wish my skin had the same glow as the glow of a cinnamon teal. And if it opens up its wing, it has something called a speculum, which is a bunch of feathers in the secondary feathers of the wing that are a different color. You see that in a lot of ducks in particular. And on the cinnamon teal, when it opens up the wing, it has this beautiful blue in the wing. I adore cinnamon teals because they range from, I don't want to overstate it, but way up the West Coast, all the way down to Argentina. But they don't cross to the east. So we don't see them in the east. So we get scarlet tanagers, but you guys get cinnamon teals. So whenever I am here in the West, I am looking to get my cinnamon teal fix, because that color is just, I think I've used the word incandescent before, but I'll use it again. It's an intense, glowing kind of brown that you don't see in any other bird I've seen. Red-headed woodpecker. Now, when people say, oh, I saw a red-headed woodpecker, ignore them. Because what they've really seen is a red-bellied woodpecker, which has a red stripe on the back of the head. And people, understandably, call it a red-headed woodpecker, but it's really red-bellied woodpecker, so named because if you stunned the bird and it fell unconscious on its back, and you could see a little tiny patch of feathers right about here that are red. That's it. You almost never see it. But that's why they call it a red-bellied woodpecker. Why do they call it that? Because this bird exists with that entirely blood crimson red head. Really spectacular. We're going outside the states now, because there's lots of birds. This is a superb fairy wren from Australia, and I had the pleasure of seeing that when I was birding in Sydney one year. Tiny little guy. Golden eagle, which we saw before on the wing. Now we're seeing it in its perched head-first magnificence. Mountain bluebird. I was itching to see this bird for so long, and people kept telling me, because I tend to spend the winters in Palm Springs whenever I can, and people are like, oh yeah, they show up in Palm Springs every once in a while in the surrounding area, and I'm like, yeah, nonsense, I've never seen it. I used a different word besides nonsense. And then finally, just this year, like 2 months ago, I was birding with some friends. We went out to the San Jacinto Wildlife Area, and there they were. I mean, that blue is as if someone had stitched the bird out of the sky. It's really just magnificent. Here's where we get to talk about, magnificent colors, magnificent patterns, but there's some birds that are beautiful in their subtleties. And this is one of my favorites. This is a Lincoln sparrow. And sparrows I call the fine wines of birding, because you really don't appreciate sparrows until you've been birding for a little while, and then you start to tune into them and you're like, oh, okay, they're not all little brown jobs. There are actually subtle differences between these guys, and when you start to pay attention, you're like, oh, look at that. The subtle beige wash on the breast and that very fine streaking that the Lincoln sparrow has going on, and this very pastel tones of gray and ochre on the rest of the bird, just exquisite. Northern carmine bee eater from East Africa. I had the pleasure of being on the island of Lamu off the coast of Kenya, which has a lot of a very unique architectural style, Swahili influenced by Arabic, and I was looking at this fort on the island of Lamu, and on the battlements these guys were perched, and it was sunset. The sun was just about to sink below the horizon, and these guys were sort of sallying from the parapet of the fort into the air to catch bugs, and as they did, the setting sun just lit them up. It's burned into my memory. It was so spectacular. Bee eaters in general come in all kinds of beautiful colors. African crown. I'm loving the vocal reactions, by the way, because these birds merit it. This is why, the beauty of the birds is pleasure of birding number one. African crown cranes, nothing more need be said. Yeah. See, now we're getting to the tanagers. I showed you the scarlet tanager from the east to begin with. What most people don't realize is that we call those tanagers and these tanagers, these are the true tanagers. The genetic research has taught us over time that what we call the scarlet tanager in the east, we have the western tanager here in the west. They're not true tanagers. This is a true tanager. You go down to the American tropics, and the thing that will blow your mind, besides the dazzling variety of hummingbirds, is the dazzling array of colors in the tanagers. They all have pretty much the same form, but the colors just come, it's mind-blowing. So this is, I believe this is a paradise tanager, which I've never seen. We're gonna just blip through a couple of tanagers. You're gonna be like, holy crap, I gotta go to the tropics. When can I book my flight? This is a green-headed tanager. This is a silver-beaked tanager, and this one I have seen in Trinidad and Tobago, and the beak really is that silver. And this is a bay-headed tanager, which I've also seen in Trinidad and Tobago, also in Costa Rica. Just tanagers, and they're unique to the Americas. There are no tanagers in the old world, just like hummingbirds are unique to the Americas. So they're kind of the glory of the American tropics, so the hummingbirds and the tanagers, as you can see. Scarlet macaw. Now, parrots in general are not unique to the Americas. In fact, there's two places, well, no, there's actually three places where they thrive. The tropics in America, where you get the macaws, like the scarlet macaw, in Africa, but where they really go crazy is in Australia, where they have cockatoos and rosellas and so many different kinds of parrots, they had to invent whole new names for them. That's a plate-billed mountain toucan. And that was the glory of my trip to Ecuador, or one of the glories of my trip to Ecuador, first trip to Ecuador, was seeing that. Because a lot of toucans, you know, they tend to be colored the same way, and then along comes this blue thing. And there just aren't very many blue toucans. So this is really a treasure. Something as elegant as a swan you can't argue with. This is a tundra swan, native to the Americas. The mute swans you see with the orange bill, they are not native. They are introduced. So that's why a lot of wildlife management government groups treat them as pests. But this bird is native to the Americas. Again, going back to the subtlety, if you've ever seen a solitary sandpiper and gotten a really good close look, you will be amazed at the patterning, how that, what seems to be just an ordinary brown, is just layered in so many different textures and patterns. Lilac-breasted roller. We're back in Africa now. This is one of the iconic birds, songbirds of Africa, because of, obviously, its colors. On the opposite end of the spectrum, from the multicolored lilac-breasted roller and the pure white of a tundra swan, is the common raven, which we are lucky enough to have here in the West in abundance. I'm not sure how many are in Sacramento, but I know in Palm Springs, they are everywhere, and they are the smartest birds. They are brilliant. Great story about the common raven. They did a test where they sent a guy into the woods with some food to try to please the ravens, basically. And what the ravens started doing is every time this guy showed up in the woods, they sent out an alert, like, the good guy's here, and the ravens all came. They sent the same guy out into the woods wearing a Dick Cheney mask and had him take the food away and steal the food. And the ravens were not having it. And they're like, that expletive deleted is back in the forest. Everybody be on alert. And that message got transmitted across several generations of ravens, that when you see the guy with the Dick Cheney mask, be on alert. So, I mean, these birds are crazy smart. They have facial recognition of individual people. If they had opposable thumbs, we'd be toast as the masters of the planet. That's a Caspian tern, just to get in some coastal birds. But again, really elegant. If you've ever seen a tern in flight, they've got these tapered wings, and they're just gorgeous. Albatrosses. I had never seen albatrosses until this past December when I took a trip down to Antarctica. And I got to see this light-mantled sooty albatross. The shading on this bird, how it goes from this dark chocolate brown to the silver on the back of the neck. Painted bunting. Now, the tropics may have tanagers, but we in North America have painted buntings. Now, unfortunately, they're sort of restricted pretty much to like coastal south. So like Georgia, the Carolinas, I think also a little bit in like Louisiana, Texas, Alabama, coastal areas generally. But it's like someone vomited in Technicolor all over the bird. Scarlet ibis, the national bird of Trinidad, and that color comes from the shrimp it eats. So very much like flamingos, the same thing. The shrimp is what gives them their color. But there is a place called Caroni Swamp in Trinidad where you go out on a boat and you sit there at sunset and all the scarlet ibises start flying in and they start roosting in the trees, turning the trees red. That's a sword-billed hummingbird. I saw that for about 2 seconds when I was in Costa Rica on this giant tube of a flower, and I thought, it's like seeing a unicorn, and we'll get to that. But you're just like, this isn't possible. No bird can have a bill that long. And I think that bill is actually short for a sword-billed hummingbird. I think there are sword-bills with bills that are actually longer than that. This might be a young bird. And the California condor, which many people may not think is beautiful, but I will give you an argument on that. And it is very endangered, but making a comeback, and it is only found in places like the Grand Canyon in parts of Arizona and in parts of California. So it's a bird that is very particular to here. And the biggest, by wingspan, it's the biggest bird in North America. So it's really dramatic. So that's the beauty of the birds. First and foremost, I mean, you go out birding, that's what's going to grab you, is just these incredible things that you just never thought you'd ever see, and yet there they are, for real. Number 2, the joy of being in a natural setting, because if you're going to see the birds, you got to go where you're going to find them. So where do you end up? You end up in places like this. This is an island off the coast of Georgia called Little St. Simon Island, and 4 of us were out there, and you just come to this open expanse from this closed-in oak forest. And suddenly it's just all this seagrass stretching for miles and the sky above it, and that's all you see. You're also swatting a lot of mosquitoes, but that's an occupational hazard with birding because where the bugs are, the birds are. But yeah, no, just to be engaged suddenly with this environment. And remember, you're not out there necessarily looking for a great vista. It comes at you sideways because you're looking for the birds, but the birds are part and parcel of this place. And suddenly this place is there when you weren't thinking about it, and you can't help but absorb it. And absorb it in a way that's completely different from how you might normally take it in, because you're understanding it now in context of, oh, this place provides everything that this particular kind of bird needs. It's home, it's food, and you really start to develop an appreciation not just for how it looks, but how it functions in our world. This is outside of Palm Springs, completely different habitat, where that was a wet swamp environment. This is a dry desert environment, and yet still starkly beautiful, almost lunar. And this is a jungle in Ecuador, a vista of a jungle in Ecuador. So, all these places that you find as you're birding, that you go to for birding, you can't help but be overwhelmed by the natural beauty. And that includes, let's see if this video will run. This is Antarctica. And yeah, it's another world. And in this other world, you will find penguins of all kinds and other birds. And on the way down there, you'll find albatrosses. So it's just, you look at that and you're like, this is part of our planet. And there are birds there, always, no matter where you go, birds. Or a man-made environment like Central Park, because Central Park is entirely man-made. This is Central Park at dawn one morning when I was out there looking for birds, and suddenly I just stopped and I was just like, I just have to look at this for a while. It's incredibly healing to be in these places. It's why I wish more of us got out there, particularly more of us black and brown folks, because there are many reasons built into, sort of baked into our society and into our culture that has kept black folk out from places like this, where we don't feel welcome or we don't feel safe, or just economically they're not accessible to us. And that needs to change, because being someplace like this will change how you operate in the world. Or a rooftop in the middle of Manhattan. Yes, that is in some sense a part of nature too. We like to think that our built man-made cities are sort of, there's nature and then there's that. Yes and no. Sure, our built cities are more mediated by human influence, but you know what? Beavers built dams and completely changed the environment around them into ponds where there was none before. So we just change our environment in a way that is perhaps more striking, more dramatic, but it's still part of the natural world. And I say that particularly for a place like New York, which is sitting on the Atlantic Flyway, and all the birds migrating up and down the Atlantic coast are going to funnel through New York City. This is my own rooftop in New York, where one day I went up to the roof and I saw this big old red-tailed hawk sitting across the street on top of the roof, because New York City has a lot of rats and a lot of pigeons, so it's got a lot of prey. So there's this red-tailed hawk, and he's a neighborhood regular, but then I hear click, 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 an American kestrel, mad as hell that this big old raptor is in his territory. In fact, there's two of them, and they're taking turns like tag team wrestling, strafing him, dive bombing him. So you hear click, 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 and one takes a run and then stops, and then the next one comes in, click, 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 takes a run, and suddenly they both stop. I'm like, oh, what's going on now? And then I hear and a peregrine falcon, our biggest falcon, comes swooping in and takes a run at the red-tailed. And the poor red-tailed hawks are like, and the kestrels, meanwhile, are sitting on the sidelines going like, well, we're staying out of this now. All happening on this rooftop in the middle of Manhattan, and people down below haven't got a clue that all this is going on above their heads. So never write off your urban environments as a place where you can find plenty of birds and plenty of natural action going on. Oh, wow, I got to speed this up. And you can introduce your own nature into such an environment. This is that same rooftop where I've grown native grasses and native wildflowers, and the results are that the birds like to go there. So something you can do yourself if you have a little bit of outdoor space, even in the middle of a city. Number 3, the joy of scientific discovery. I'll use this example. I was sitting outside on the patio in Palm Springs. I was working remotely to my job then in New York. And so I was sitting for hours outside enjoying the warmth and the sunshine on my laptop, not really moving. And I felt this tingle on my leg. And I'm like, okay, I don't know what that is, but I resisted the urge to just go like this. Thank God, because I looked down and there was a female Costas hummingbird who was flying up and down my leg, probing it with her bill. And I'm just in there like, okay, I don't know what is going on here, but I'm just gonna let this close encounter play out. And then eventually she flew away. I choose this as an example of the joy of scientific discovery, besides being just an amazing, encounter with a wild animal on its own terms, because I finally figured out what happened was I had been sitting there so long, it was the beginning of the nesting season, and she was checking out my leg hair as potential nesting material. So the joy of scientific discovery. The joy of collecting. And I don't mean physically collecting the birds, but the way you collect in birding is you keep lists. Every birder has lists. I have heard some crazy lists. I have a list of the birds I've seen from my roof. Most birders have a life list of all the birds they've seen in their entire life in various parts of the country or various parts of the world. Some people have like county lists, like, oh, the birds I've seen in San Diego County. There's someone I know who kept a list of birds they had seen from their bathroom window. So it fills that sort of same impulse as stamp collecting, because you always want that next bird. And I'll give the one example that I always give, that I always experience every spring in Central Park when I'm doing the songbird migration, and we get warblers. As I mentioned, you saw the Blackburnian warbler earlier. In the east, we can in Manhattan, we can get up to 25 warblers in a single day. That's a really good day, but it's possible. Over the course of the season, you're like collecting the warblers. Oh, have you had a Wilson's warbler yet? Oh, no, not yet. All right, well, go find one. And by the end of the season, there's one that we're all looking for. The mourning warbler, so called because that black bib over the gray head makes it look like it's in mourning, mourning, as in, mourning for the dead. This bird is so tough, skulks around in the underbrush, and you'll hear it more often than you'll see it. You'll hear a cheery, 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 chor, chor, cheery, 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 chor, chor. And you're looking high and low and you can't find it. And if you're lucky, you'll get a glimpse of this. The first one I ever saw, I was in the Catskills, and I'm hearing the sound. I'm like, what is that bird? I have no idea what that is. And it was coming from like right next to me. And so finally I just stood still, and it came out from a shrub next to me and literally went thump, 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 right across my feet. It was just stunning. The joy of hunting without bloodshed. And what that means is a lot of times, you're looking for the birds. You got to stalk them. You've got to hunt them. You've got to know what you're doing, what you're looking for, and how to look. Best example for me of that was when I was in Central Park. Okay, another Central Park story. Sorry, that's my favorite thing. And I'm looking at a warbler from behind, and it's blue, and it makes this throaty sound. And I'm like, okay, that's a black-throated blue warbler, a common warbler in the East. It would be super exciting if you saw one here in the West, because you guys don't get many here, if any. I'm like, that's a black-throated blue warbler. Seen plenty of those this spring. Took a couple of steps, and something in my subconscious said, you idiot! That wasn't a black-throated blue. Go back and look. And then it had moved. I spent an hour and a half stalking that bird, little tiny bird, in all of Central Park. But I'm like, all right, where's it going to go? It might move towards this area. Literally hanging around, praying it would sing again, and finally, I saw the cerulean warbler. Really hard bird to find in Central Park. Our common saying in Central Park is if you are in danger and if you are in trouble, you don't yell help, you yell cerulean, and you'll get a response much more quickly. Number 6, the joy of puzzle solving. And this is where your ID skills come in, because these birds don't hold still. They're living things. They move. You're not seeing them in great light. You've got to figure out with some of these birds, it's not as easy as looking at a harlequin duck, Histrionicus histrionicus, with that bold patterning all over it that gives it away instantly. A lot of times these birds are tough, so you've got to use your ID skills. I bumped into a bird in Argentina, and I spent an hour just studying it, trying to figure out what the heck it was, and it was a brand-colored flycatcher. Now, it may not look like much, but can I tell you, after an hour of studying the bird, when I finally figured out what it was, I was like, yes! The sense of accomplishment is real. But the best, by far, of the 7 pleasures of birding is what I like to refer to as the unicorn effect. What is that? If you've been birding, even for a little while, you'll become familiar with, some birds that maybe you see in the field guide, and you'll be like, wow, it'd be great to see that one day. And, you go for a long time, you see pictures of it, and you maybe see it on a special, and then one day, flap, 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 there it is in real life, and you're looking at it. And it's as if a unicorn stepped out of the forest and came to life. It is that kind of experience and that kind of thrill. I consider it the highest thrill the highest of the 7 pleasures of birding. It happened to me when I was a little kid. I couldn't have been more than like 11 years old, and I'm in the backyard, and I had a Roger Tory Peterson field guide to the birds, and it had this picture of the northern cardinal. And I'm like, that's the most amazing bird. It's all red, it's got a crest. I'll never see one. And one day I'm in my own backyard and I hear, and I look up on the antenna and see this. And the overwhelming experience cannot be communicated. Another good example, again, when I was a kid, I saw the TV movie Harpy in 1971, starring Elizabeth Ashley. Stupid movie. About this architect who takes up falconry, and he's got a bird called a harpy eagle that I had never heard of before. And he's training it. And I think, if I remember correctly, his wife is a horrible person, and he eventually trains the bird to attack her while she's driving her convertible to cause her death. The important part of all, I put the description here because someone posted, this is not my description, this is what someone posted online about this movie, and it almost perfectly encapsulated my experience of the movie, was watching it as a kid, but being enraptured by this harpy eagle because it's so unique looking. So, this bird was stuck in my head, and later on I found out it is in fact, depends on how you're measuring, but it is the largest eagle in the world. And I had guides that showed a picture of it. It looks like this. And then one day I got a phone call from a friend of mine, also in New York City Audubon, saying, hey, I have a friend down in Ecuador who knows where there's an active, accessible harpy eagle's nest. And if you know where there's an active, accessible nest, the bird is pretty much guaranteed. He was going down. I forgot to mention, this is in the middle of the height of the coronavirus epidemic. So nobody's going anywhere. But he's going down, he's booked the flights, he's arranged all the places to stay, and he'll be doing all the driving, which is really important because I'm the stereotypical New Yorker who does not drive. So everything was set up. I'm like, there is never going to be a better chance for me to see a harpy eagle. So despite the pandemic, despite all the hoops I had to jump through, I got myself down there. And this is what I saw. Wait for it. Wait for it. Oh. That's with my phone. Yeah. She's magnificent. And I say she because in raptors, in birds of prey, the female is almost always about 1/3 bigger than the male. And she was there guarding we got to see the chick on the nest, and she was guarding it the whole time. I destroyed like a $200 pair of hiking boots, walking through muck up to the ankles, so the muck got inside the boots. I did not care. I saw a living unicorn come to life in a harpy eagle that had been in my head since I was a kid. Just spectacular. So those are the 7 pleasures of birding that I encourage all of you to experience yourselves while you're birding. And those are the pleasures of birding. And I say all of us because not all of us get to experience it, or haven't traditionally, and that's what needs to change. I'm looking around at this audience. I am seeing a lot of light faces and a couple of brown faces. I am really happy to see a couple of brown faces in here because we don't show up that much in the birding world, and that's what needs to change, because the birds don't give a damn. They don't care what color your skin is. They don't care the least thing they care about is what side of a border you are on or you come from, because borders are meaningless to them. They don't care whether you can see, because you can appreciate them with your ears. They don't care if you're deaf, because you can appreciate them with your eyes. They don't care if you're homebound, because you can sit by your window and look out your window and see the birds and bring them to your window with feeders. So the birds don't care, and they belong to no one, but they are for all of us to enjoy. And traditionally, not all of us have had the opportunity to enjoy them. So that's what I'm talking about when I talk about the pitfalls of birding. It's not so much pitfalls of birding, but it's the pitfalls of humanity, that we don't have everybody having access to these incredible creatures. That diversity of birds that we've just been looking at and talking about, all of that should be accessible to everyone, and it's not. Most importantly, if we want to protect the diversity of birds, forget that, people of all ethnicities, races, sexual orientations, gender identities should be birding because it's the right thing to do. I bore myself just saying that. It's true, but I bore myself saying it. We have to get everyone involved in birding because it is the diversity of people being involved in birding is the only way we're going to be able to protect that diversity of birds that we've just been talking about. Because the demographics of this nation are changing. It's not a good thing, it's not a bad thing, it is just a thing, it is a fact. And if birding remains something that is only perceived as, only white people do that, guess what? The birds are going to be the losers. And all of us who love them will not have them anymore. I want to talk about some of the birders I ran into doing my TV show Extraordinary Birder, like Christopher Joe in Alabama. His family has a black-owned farm that they've had for generations, and what they've started to do is to manage the farm not just for the cattle that they raise there, but also for the birds, because what they discovered is, if we, make a home for the birds as well, then there are birders who will come to our farm and pay money even to see these birds, and that'll help us keep the farm. It's win-win-win for everybody, and that way everyone gets to see, too far. Swallow-tailed kites, gorgeous creatures. Marie and Glenna Barrett, here in California, are working to save the burrowing owl. They're a mother-daughter team. Chris Salieri in my hometown of New York is working to save the piping plover on the beaches of New York City. Adorable little bird. And I know you're all saying, the beaches of New York City? New York City is a city of islands. We have plenty of beaches. And these endangered birds nest there. But they're under pressure from human use of the beach. Jose Salguero in Puerto Rico, blind. So what does he do? There's a forest that they're trying to restore in Puerto Rico, and they can't observe it 24/7 to find out what birds are coming back, but they can do audio recordings 24/7, and then they can have Jose, who is incredibly attuned to the sounds of the birds, listen to the recordings and tell them exactly what has come back to the forest. And his ears picked up the limpkin, which has been gone from Puerto Rico entirely and came back to that forest that swampy part of the forest that they've been restoring. So in this picture of all those diverse people, you have several sexual orientations, several races, several ethnicities, several disability statuses, several age groups. That's what we need if we're going to save the birds. We need all hands on deck, not just because it's the right thing to do, because it's vital to saving the birds and the habitat because of the change in the U.S. demographics. I'll skip this because we're running out of time, but I wanted to mention there's a whole bunch of things we can do to try to engage all kinds of people in birding. I recognize that diversity is along a whole bunch of different axes, that language is a minefield, so all we can do is try our best, but try to use the proper terms when you're addressing people. It makes them feel welcome. Beware of unconscious bias. That's a huge one. A lot of people are not aware of their own biases. Consider accessibility when you're having a walk. Be culturally sensitive. If you hold all your walks on Sunday mornings, a lot of black folk won't show up because they're in church, because that's a big thing for a lot of black folk. Not for me, I'm unchurched. Doesn't make a damn difference to me. But a lot of black folk won't show up because they're in church. Retention is the hard part. It is really, really tough. Once you get people to come, to keep them coming, but you got to keep working at it. You want to meet people where they are. Maybe schedule some of your walks in neighborhoods you normally wouldn't do, where maybe you're not going to see as great as birds, but you'll get people there and get them started into birding. And be creative, come up with new ideas, expect to fail, and learn from your mistakes, and keep trying, and keep at it. That's how we expand birding, and it's really important. It's not easy. You're going to be forced outside your comfort zone. It requires a sustained effort. It can't be a one-shot thing. And like reading these slides, which are kind of sideways, it'll throw you off balance. But that's okay. Why do we need to do this? Because in North America, we have already lost, just in my lifetime, I've been birding for, I'm embarrassed to say this, half a century. But in that time, and I have noticed this, all of us who have been birding for a long time have noticed this, we have lost a third of the birds in North America. They're just gone. I'm not talking about species, I'm talking about numbers. We've lost 3 billion birds in 50 years. 50 years, that's it. We can reverse this. It's not a matter of, okay, we can stop this. No, we can reverse this. We can bring them back. First of all, we're getting a lot of new birders because of COVID, so we can engage a whole bunch of new people. But the other thing is, I think back to, and again, I went there for the show. It's a place called Fresh Kills on Staten Island, which is one of the boroughs of Manhattan, and it used to be a landfill, the biggest garbage dump in the world. And then finally they closed it down and they said, well, I guess we got to ameliorate the environment here and do something with it. So they capped it and they let the grass grow. And in the process, they created acres of new grassland in the middle of New York City where there had been none before. And if you build it, they will come. That grassland is hosting ring-necked pheasants, eastern meadowlarks, endangered sedge wrens, grasshopper sparrows, savanna sparrows, all coming and nesting in this grassland that did not exist before. So we can reverse this. We can bring the birds back. We can help that diversity of birds that we've been oohing and eyeing over for this whole talk. We can help them and bring them back, but it's going to take all hands on deck. And so that's really why we really have to get everyone involved in birding so that this diversity becomes this diversity and this diversity of people all getting involved in birding, because everyone deserves every one of the 7 pleasures that birding has to offer.